The blood rushed to my fingertips, making them tingle as I held the key card to my own hotel. I stood there watching my sister Sarah block the entrance. Inside, I could hear my father Arthur's booming laughter, a sound that usually meant joy but right now just echoed with a cold irony in the Grand Azure lobby. The lobby I designed, the hotel I owned, and here I was 35 years old, standing on the sidewalk like some unwanted solicitor. "You can't seriously think you're coming in," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a condescending whisper. She adjusted the straps of her designer dress, a knockoff I recognized immediately from the preliminary sketches my designer friend had shared with me last week. It was a cheap imitation, but Sarah carried it with the same misplaced air of superiority she had worn since we were kids. "This is the Grand Azure, Mia. The tasting menu alone costs more than you make in a month." If only she knew, I had personally created that menu with our Michelin-starred chef tasting every single dish, debating the perfect wine pairings until 3 in the morning. It was a project of passion, a testament to what I had built. "He's my father, too," I said, my voice steadier than I expected, a calm resolve settling over me. The small envelope in my clutch, containing the deed to a vacation villa in Tuscany, one of the Grand Azure's most exclusive properties, suddenly felt heavy, a symbol of everything they thought I wasn't. "My name is Mia. I'm 35, a hospitality entrepreneur, and this is the story of how I reclaimed my place at a table I actually owned." Mom and Dad were very specific. Sarah continued checking her reflection in the glass doors, as if the world revolved around her perfect makeup. "They only want successful people here, people who won't embarrass the family." The irony struck me like a physical blow. Just yesterday I'd signed off on a 100 million expansion of the Grand Azure chain. Today, I was apparently too embarrassing to enter my own hotel. I fought the urge to laugh as the absurdity of the situation crashed over me. 10 years ago, when I decided to leave the family's small accounting firm to pursue hospitality management, they'd all but disowned me. My father's words still resonated in my memory, a constant ache and a powerful motivator. "No daughter of mine is going to be a glorified waitress." So, I'd let them think what they wanted. Let them believe I was struggling in restaurant management, scraping by, barely making ends meet. Meanwhile, I'd built the Azure Hospitality Group into one of the most successful luxury hotel chains in the country. The glorified waitress, now owned 35 five-star hotels across 3 continents. "Ma!" My mother, Helen's sharp voice, cut through my thoughts as she appeared behind Sarah, her face a mask of annoyance. "What are you doing here? We discussed this." No, they hadn't discussed it. They had declared it. I'd received a text message from my mother this morning, a short, cutting message that had stung more than she could ever know. "Don't come to Dad's birthday. It's at the Grand Azure. You can't afford it. Don't embarrass us." "I brought a gift," I said quietly, holding up the small envelope. "Oh, what is it?" "A gift card to Olive Garden." Sarah laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that grated on my nerves. "Or did you scrape together enough tips to buy him something from the mall?" My mother's eyes narrowed at my simple clutch bag, a handmade Italian leather piece that cost more than Sarah's car, though she'd never know it. "Whatever it is, I'm sure your sister's gift is more appropriate," Helen said, her voice dripping with judgment. "She just made junior partner at her firm, you know." I knew, just like I knew her firm was currently in negotiations to lease office space in one of my buildings. The lease they desperately needed and couldn't quite afford. My real estate division had sent me the reports just yesterday, detailing every aspect of their struggling finances. "Sarah's doing so well," Mom continued, warming to her favorite topic: new house in the suburbs, luxury car, wonderful fiancé with such good prospects. She paused, giving me a critical once-over, a slow, condescending sweep of her gaze. "And you? Well, at least you're trying, I suppose." I thought about my penthouse overlooking Central Park, my collection of rare sports cars, the private jet I'd flown in on this morning to make sure I was here on time. I thought about the board meeting I'd left early to fly to this city, a meeting where we were finalizing the acquisition of an entire portfolio of luxury resorts. "Yes, Mom. At least I'm trying." Speaking of trying, Sarah smirked, gesturing to my outfit. "That dress, couldn't you have made an effort? This is the Grand Azure, not some diner." I ran my hand over the sophisticated black silk, custom made by one of Paris's most exclusive designers, the same designer who had refused to make anything for Sarah last month. A detail I'd learned when my stylist mentioned the incident during my last fitting. It was simple, elegant, and whispered class, in a way Sarah's knockoff screamed for attention. "It's what I could manage," I said mildly. "Well, you can't come in," Sarah declared, planting herself more firmly in the doorway. "We reserved the entire VP floor. It's for family and distinguished guests only. The VIP floor, my VIP floor. The one I'd personally redesigned last year, down to selecting every piece of artwork and every crystal chandelier." "The distinguished guests being?" I asked, a genuine curiosity creeping into my voice about who they'd invited to my hotel. "Oh, you wouldn't know them." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "The Andersons, they own that successful law firm. The Blackwoods, old money, you know, and Mr. Harrison from the bank, all very important people." I suppressed a smile. Thomas Anderson leased 3 of my properties. The Blackwoods had recently begged for a membership at my most exclusive resort. And Mr. Harrison, his bank was currently seeking a major loan from my investment group. "Right," I said. "Very important people." "Exactly," Sarah said, clearly pleased I understood my place. "So you see why you can't be here. What would people think if they knew Dad's failure of a daughter was serving their drinks?" "Sarah," our mother chided softly, though her eyes showed approval. "Be nice. Mia made her choices. If she'd stayed with the family firm like you did, things would be different." The family firm that now occupied a modest office in one of my buildings, always barely making rent. My property manager sent me monthly reports on all tenants, including my family's struggling business. Just then, my brother-in-law David appeared, straightening his tie. "What's taking so long? Everyone's waiting for—" He spotted me and his face dropped. "Mia? Didn't expect to see you here?" "Clearly not," I replied. "David just made vice president at his bank," my mother announced proudly. "Junior vice president," I corrected automatically, knowing his exact position because his bank handled some of my smaller accounts. My financial team provided me with detailed reports on all our banking partners. "Well, it's more impressive than whatever you're doing," Sarah snapped. "What is it now?" "Assistant manager at some chain restaurant." I thought about the board meeting I'd left early this morning where we discussed acquiring that very bank David worked for. The paperwork was probably still sitting on my desk upstairs in my private office. "Something like that," I said. "This is ridiculous," my mother declared. "Maya, just go. You're making a scene." "I'll tell your father you couldn't make it." "Couldn't afford it, you mean?" Sarah added with a laugh. I looked past them, through the grand entrance at the hotel I'd built from the ground up. At the marble floors I'd selected, the crystal chandeliers I'd commissioned, the artwork I'd personally curated. All of it, every inch, was mine. For a moment, I considered walking away. Let them have their party. Let them keep believing what they wanted to believe. But then I remembered something my first mentor had told me. Success doesn't mean anything if you can't stand up for yourself. My jaw tightened as I straightened my shoulders, feeling the strength of everything I'd built without their support or approval. My fingers stopped tingling, a calm clarity washing over me. "Actually," I said quietly, a small smile playing on my lips, "I think I'll stay." "Actually," I said quietly, a small smile playing on my lips, "I think I'll stay." Sarah's face went slack, then hardened into a look of pure disbelief. "You think you'll stay? Mia? Are you listening? This isn't some back alley diner where you can just lurk. This is a private party. We have real guests, important people." My mother, Helen, chimed in, her voice a low, warning hum. "Mia, don't be difficult. Your father doesn't need this kind of spectacle on his birthday. He's already disappointed enough." The words were like a small, sharp stab. Disappointed enough. They had always seen my life through the lens of their own disappointment. My career choice, my single status, my independent life. It was all a failure to them because it wasn't the life they had planned. They saw me as a blank space where Sarah's shiny, respectable life should have been. I stood my ground, my posture as straight and solid as the marble columns behind me. "I'm not making a scene, Mom. I'm simply standing in a lobby." "This isn't just a lobby," Sarah scoffed, gesturing around with a dramatic wave of her hand, the cheap sequins on her dress catching the light. "This is the Grand Azure. It's a place of exclusivity. You wouldn't understand." I looked around. The massive Murano glass chandelier I had commissioned from Venice glittered above us, each delicate piece chosen personally by me. The artwork on the walls, collection of contemporary pieces by up-and-coming artists, was a project I had supervised for months. The air smelled of polished wood, fresh lilies, and the subtle, signature scent of the Grand Azure, a blend of cedar and bergamot that took us 6 months to perfect. She was right. I didn't just understand it. I was it. Every piece of it was a fragment of my vision, my passion, my blood and sweat. "I think I understand it just fine," I said, my tone still mild, almost bored. My mother sighed a long, exasperated sound. Mia, why do you have to be so stubborn? Just yesterday, your father was telling Mr. Harrison how well Sarah is doing, how proud he is of her. He wants to show the world that his children are a success. Do you see now why you can't be a part of this? I felt a quiet, simmering heat rise in my chest. So that's what it was all about. It wasn't about love or family or even a birthday. It was about appearances. It was about using Sarah as a prop to impress a room full of people who, ironically, I had more power over than my father ever would. He wants to show the world what a successful daughter looks like. I said, my eyes meeting my mother's. And you think that's Sarah? Of course it is. Sarah snapped. She's a junior partner at a top law firm. Her fiancé, David, just made VP at his bank. We have a new house in the suburbs. We're building a life, Mia. A real one. What are you building? Another chain restaurant. She said the last part with a curl of her lip, as if the word itself was distasteful. I took a deep breath, letting her words hang in the air for a moment. They were so blissfully, magnificently ignorant. You think I'm building chain restaurants? I said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across my face. Don't play coy, Sarah retorted. Mom said you're a manager, a glorified waitress, as Dad puts it. We know how hard you've had it since you left the family firm. It's a shame, really. You could have been so much more. I almost laughed out loud. Could have been so much more. My mind flashed to the last monthly report from my property manager. It showed that my family's struggling accounting firm was barely making rent on the office space they leased. The office space they leased from me. The same report mentioned the law firm currently negotiating a lease in another of my properties, a lease that Sarah's firm desperately needed to expand. I had a mental image of the report on my desk, with a note from my real estate division: urgent, high-risk tenant, not meeting financial benchmarks. I had personally signed off on a temporary discount for the family firm, just to keep them afloat. They had no idea they were in my debt. Is that David I hear? I asked, my gaze shifting past them as my brother-in-law approached. He was a tall man, but today, next to my towering confidence, he seemed to shrink. He had the same arrogant swagger as Sarah, but it was just as transparent and just as fake. Mia, he said, his face a mixture of surprise and disapproval. Didn't expect to see you here. I told Sarah you probably had to work tonight. We're all here for Arthur's birthday. Clearly, I replied, my eyes fixed on his perfectly knotted tie. David just made vice president at his bank. My mother announced again, as if the title was a magical incantation that would somehow legitimize their entire existence. Junior vice president. I corrected automatically, the words a gentle reminder of his true rank. I knew his exact position because his bank, a small regional outfit, handled some of my smaller accounts. His promotion, though a big deal to them, was just a line item on my quarterly financial report, a detail my financial team had provided me a week ago. I was the client that made up over a quarter of his bank's total revenue. Sarah scoffed. Junior vice president is more impressive than whatever you're doing, Mia. What is it now? Assistant manager at some chain restaurant. Assistant manager. David snorted, joining in the mockery. How humble. You know, Mia, you should have stuck with the family firm. It's a solid career path. My bank is actually looking to acquire a bigger space soon. Who knows? Maybe we can give you a job. I fought the urge to close my eyes and just savor the moment. My mind immediately went to the board meeting I'd left early this morning. We were discussing a hostile takeover of a small regional bank, the very bank David worked for. The paperwork, the acquisition details, the exit plan for the bank's entire executive team, it was all in a folder on my desk upstairs. They were debating my name, Mia, and whether to let me go on this journey for them, and how I could afford this life. Something like that, I said, a faint, amused smile on my lips. A job. That sounds nice. This is ridiculous. My mother declared again, her patience clearly gone. Mia, just go. You're making a scene. We have distinguished guests inside. What would they think? What would they think if they knew Dad's failure of a daughter was serving their drinks? Sarah repeated, adding her favorite insult with a laugh. I looked past them, through the grand entrance. I saw the marble floors I'd selected, the crystal chandeliers I'd commissioned, the artwork I'd personally curated. Every inch of this building, every brick and every tile, was a monument to my success, to their failure to understand me. I thought about the words of my first mentor. Success doesn't mean anything if you can't stand up for yourself. They had stood there for 10 years, looking down on me, believing their own lies. They had built an elaborate, fragile fantasy, and I had quietly, painstakingly built my own reality, brick by painful brick. I could have walked away. I could have let them have their little party, their flimsy pride, their self-congratulatory delusions. But I was tired of living in the shadows of their judgment. I was tired of being an afterthought. I took a final, steadying breath. My jaw tightened as I straightened my shoulders. The tingling in my fingertips was gone now, replaced by a calm clarity. The time for humility was over. The time for whispers was over. Actually, I said, my voice a quiet command that cut through their laughter and their condescending remarks. I think I'll stay. Before my mother could respond, the heavy glass doors to the hotel swung open, and Owen, my head of security, stepped out. He was a large man with a calm, professional demeanor, and he'd been with me since I bought my first struggling hotel 7 years ago. He had helped me transform it from a rundown motel into the flagship of the Azure hospitality chain. He saw me, and a look of surprise and then relief crossed his face. He had been looking for me for over an hour. "Is everything all right here, Madam CEO?" His voice carried clearly across the entrance, cutting the tense silence like a knife. "Your usual table is ready, and Chef Michel is waiting with the tasting menu for your approval." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's mouth fell open, her perfectly applied lipstick suddenly garish against her pale face. My mother gripped the brass door handle for support, her knuckles turning white. David's smug expression dissolved into one of total confusion. "Owen," I said, the sound of his name in the silence a comfort. I smiled warmly. Perfect timing. The confrontation was over. The truth was about to be revealed, and it was going to be glorious. "Is everything all right here, Madam CEO?" Owen's voice carried clearly across the entrance, cutting the tense silence like a knife. "Your usual table is ready, and Chef Michel is waiting with the tasting menu for your approval." The silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't a peaceful quiet, it was the abrupt, shocked silence of a shattered moment. Sarah's mouth fell open, her perfectly applied lipstick suddenly looking garish against her pale face. My mother, Helen, gripped the brass door handle for support, her knuckles turning white. David's smug expression dissolved into one of total, utter confusion. His eyes flicked from Owen's crisp uniform to my face, then to my simple black dress, as if trying to reconcile what he was hearing with what he was seeing. Owen, bless his heart, didn't even flinch. He just stood there, a mountain of calm professionalism, waiting for my response. "Owen," I said, a smile finally reaching my eyes. The sound of his name in the silence was a comfort, a signal that I wasn't alone. I was with my people. Perfect timing. My family was just explaining how I couldn't afford to dine here. "Ma'am?" Owen looked genuinely confused, a small professional furrow between his brows. "But you own the entire hotel chain." My mother let out a small, strangled gasp. Sarah's designer clutch, the one she'd been so proud of, slipped from her limp fingers and clattered onto the marble steps. The sound was a loud, hollow exclamation mark in the stillness. But that's impossible," Sarah stammered, her voice a reedy whisper. "The Grand Azure is worth billions." "Which makes your comment about me not being able to afford the tasting menu rather amusing," I finished for her. My smile widened, a quiet, satisfied victory. I took a deliberate step forward, past my stunned family. The heavy glass doors slid open with a soft sigh, and I stepped into the lobby that was my masterpiece. The front desk manager, Rachel, immediately straightened to attention, her professional smile widening as she saw me. "Good evening, Miss Mia," she said, her voice clear and respectful. "The executive suite is prepared for your father's birthday celebration." Every staff member we passed as I walked toward the elevator greeted me by name, each showing the genuine respect I'd earned through years of hands-on leadership. They had seen me in the trenches, working 16-hour days, helping to make beds when we were short-staffed, standing by the line in the kitchen to ensure the food was perfect. They saw me not as a distant owner, but as their leader. My family followed me in silence, looking around as if seeing the hotel for the first time. They noticed the detail now, the way the light hit the polished floors, the elegance of the commissioned artwork, the effortless grace of the staff. Everything they had praised just moments ago as a symbol of success now stood as a monument to their ignorance. "This is some kind of joke," David finally managed, his voice shaky with a mix of denial and dawning panic. "You're just a restaurant manager." "Actually," Owen interjected, his voice firm and professional, leaving no room for doubt. "Miss Mia is the founder and CEO of Azure Hospitality Group. She owns all 35 Grand Azure hotels worldwide, along with our resort properties and restaurant chains." Sarah's face went from pale to ashen. "The villa in the south of France I tried to rent last summer, the one that was mysteriously unavailable," she'd whispered to herself, as if in a daze. That's right, I said, my voice calm as I turned to face them. Mine. My property manager forwarded me your reservation request, not realizing the connection. I glanced at David, a small, knowing glint in my eye. Just like the office building your firm is struggling to lease, David, and the resort membership you've been listed for, Mom. My mother's hand flew to her pearls, clutching them like a lifeline. But your dress, she finally managed, staring at my simple black silk with new eyes, her voice barely a whisper. Custom made in Paris, I replied, running my hand over the fabric. Around 30,000, I believe. I have a terrible habit of not checking price tags anymore. I gestured to the private elevator, the one that required a special key card. I pulled the card from my clutch, the one she thought was cheap, and held it up. Unlike Sarah's dress, which I believe is a knockoff. The real Valentino collection hasn't been released yet. I know because I attended the private showing last month. The elevator doors opened directly into the VIP lounge where my father's birthday celebration was in full swing. The music was a soft buzz, the chatter a low murmur, but the moment we stepped in, the entire room fell silent. Everyone turned to look. My father, Arthur, stood up from his place at the head table, his face a mix of shock and confusion. Mia, what are you doing here? Your mother said you couldn't afford it. I walked over to him, the soft click of my heels on the marble floor the only sound in the room. I held out the small envelope, the deed to the Tuscan villa. Happy birthday, Dad. I hope you don't mind that I'm crashing the party. In my own hotel. The silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. That's when the distinguished guests started to speak. Your hotel. Harrison from the bank stepped forward, his face breaking into a relieved, almost desperate smile. Miss Mia, I had no idea you were related to Arthur Thompson. We've been trying to secure a meeting with you for months about that loan. Mia owns the Grand Azure. Thomas Anderson, the law firm owner, joined in, his voice filled with awe. My God, Arthur. Your daughter is the mysterious CEO who's been buying up prime real estate across the city. My father sank back into his chair, the color draining from his face. All this time, we thought you were just a glorified waitress. I raised an eyebrow, my voice quiet but firm enough for the whole room to hear. Your words, I believe, from the day I left the family firm to pursue my dreams in hospitality. My mother, now clutching her pearls with both hands, demanded. But why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me? I asked, looking directly at her. You didn't believe in me 10 years ago when I needed your support. Why would I share my success with people who only measure worth by the size of someone's bank account? I paused, letting the full weight of the words sink in. Though by that metric, I suppose I'm worth more than everyone in this room combined. Sarah collapsed into a nearby chair, her face ashen. The villa in the south of France I tried to rent last summer, the one that was mysteriously unavailable. My property manager forwarded me your reservation request, not realizing the connection. Just like the office building your firm is struggling to lease, David, I added, looking at my brother-in-law who was now staring at his hands as if he'd never seen them before. And the resort membership you've been wait-listed for, Mom? Arthur started to speak, his voice unsteady. We save it. I held up my hand. I didn't reveal this to hurt you, though you've hurt me plenty over the years. I did it because I'm tired of hiding my success to spare your pride. I turned to address the room, the crowd of silent, shocked guests. Please, enjoy the party. Everything is on the house. My house. I started to walk away, then paused and looked back at my father, who was still slumped in his chair. Oh, and Dad, that envelope Sarah wouldn't let me give you. It's the deed to a villa in Tuscany, one of my most exclusive properties. Consider it a birthday gift from your failure of a daughter. I had walked in like an unwanted solicitor, and now I was leaving as the queen of the castle. The table was mine. And the show was over. The climax had passed, and the aftermath was just beginning. The next hour was surreal. The grand, sprawling VIP lounge, which just moments ago had been a stage for my family's performance, was now filled with a low, buzzing hum of whispers. People who had ignored me at previous family gatherings, people my mother and Sarah had proudly introduced, suddenly wanted to discuss business opportunities. The Blackwoods, the so-called hold money, practically begged for a membership at my most exclusive resort, their faces a mix of embarrassment and desperate charm. Mr. Harrison from the bank cornered me about his loan application, his voice a nervous, frantic plea. Through it all, my family sat in stunned silence. Sarah's fiancé, David, disappeared after learning her guaranteed future partnership at her firm depended on a lease she couldn't afford in a building I owned. Gavin kept making calls, presumably to update his resume. his face pale and his tie now a bit askew. My mother alternated between crying and trying to explain to other guests that she'd always believed in her daughter's potential, her words so hollow they barely made a sound. As the evening wound down, I found my father, Arthur, alone on the terrace, staring out at the city lights. He was standing near the edge, his hands in his pockets, a posture of defeat I had never seen on him before. "Those buildings," he said, pointing to the glittering skyline. "How many do you own?" "Enough," I replied, standing beside him, my voice calm. "The family firm's building included." He nodded slowly. He didn't seem surprised by that, just tired. "I was wrong about you, Mia? So terribly wrong." "Yes," I agreed, my gaze on the cityscape, on the lights and lives and businesses that were all part of my world. "You were." The air between us was heavy with a decade of silence, a decade of dismissal and condescension. My success, something I had always hoped would one day make them proud, had instead exposed the depth of their judgment. "Can you ever forgive us?" he asked, turning to face me. His eyes, the same blue as mine, were filled with a regret that felt both genuine and far too late. I considered his question. "Forgiveness wasn't the issue, not really. Forgiveness isn't the issue, Dad. Respect is. You never respected my choices or believed in my abilities. You only respected success after it was proven, after it could be measured in dollars and titles. You didn't believe in me when I was just an idea. You didn't believe in me when I was a student. You only believe in me now that I'm a fact." He looked away, his jaw working as if to find the words, but there were none to be found. "And now?" I smiled slightly, a bittersweet curve of my lips. "Now you can tell people your daughter owns the Grand Azure. That should satisfy your need for impressive dinner party conversation." He didn't reply, and I knew there was nothing more to say. The foundation of our relationship, built on their expectations and my supposed failures, had crumbled. It wasn't a relationship I could rebuild, not right then. Maybe not ever. I left him there, heading to my private office on the top floor. The elevator ride was silent, a moment of peace after the emotional storm. When the doors opened, I stepped into the world I had built for myself. My office was a sanctuary. The windows looked out over the entire city, a view I never tired of. My desk was exactly as I had left it this morning, a testament to the quiet power I wielded. The paperwork for acquiring David's bank sat right where I had left it, the words acquisition target underlined in bold. Tomorrow, the family dynamic would shift dramatically. Sarah would no longer be the golden child. My mother would frantically rewrite history to claim she had always supported me. David and his bank would probably face a difficult future. But none of that was my concern anymore. Tonight I had finally taken my seat at the table. Not the one in the VP lounge with the uncomfortable silence and the fake smiles, but the one I had built myself. A table I'd built in a room I owned, under a roof I'd paid for. And that was worth more than any amount of belated family approval. My journey hadn't been about getting their blessing. It had been about proving my worth to myself. And tonight, for the first time in a very long time, I knew I had succeeded. I sat down at my desk, looked out at my city and finally truly felt at home.